Okay, in this tutorial we'll be talking about converting a French cuff into a barrel cuff. And I'm going to tell you what I tell my customers when they submit them. Sometimes they will be extra long. If they're real long, like in the previous tutorial where they're maybe big and you can avoid the buttonholes, then it's pretty easy. But if you can, I wouldn't mess with changing the style. In other words, I wouldn't try to make this an angle French cuff or change the roundness. I wouldn't mess with it. All you're doing is converting. You're making this French cuff into a barrel cuff. And there's a couple of things you need to observe. First of all, you need to find out what the actual width of this cuff is when you're finished. So what you do is you line up the buttonholes and turn it over to the wrong side. And this particular case, this one here is 2 5/8. And I would put 2 5/8. I don't have a very good memory, so 2 5/8. And that's the finished width. Now, many times I ask my customers if the sleeve length on their shirts is okay now. They may be half inch short on their sleeve length, and they're not aware that you can make this. If this is 2 5/8, I might make this cuff width, say 3 1/4, to give them that extra sleeve length. So that's the question I would ask. I'd send them an email and ask them, does it fit you okay now? They may be long. And so that's the whole thing. If they are long, then what you could do is when you get them, you could give them the actual sleeve length. I wouldn't get into removing sleeve plackets to give them the correct, an extra charge. But if it's just a half inch, you can chop that. I never charge for something like that to make it shorter. But anytime you have to remove the sleeve placket, it's time and labor. So you'll have to charge for that. But in this case here, all we're doing is converting. I'm keeping the roundness of it. And I'm going to make this one 3 inches. So I'll measure from the edge and I'll mark off 3 inches on both sides. And then I'll draw a line. Now, I normally allow a half inch, and I'll show you here shortly why. These are the keys. So I normally put a weight on them, and make sure you cut on that line. Don't cut on this one. I've done that where I just lost my head and cut on the wrong seam, and they'll end up short. So cut on the proper one. So now you don't have to unstitch anything. So I would go ahead and cut it. Okay. Now that I've done that, you'll find that these open up pretty easy. So again, what I would do is use my foldable knife and just tap it, just like you'd open a normal cuff or collar. And I wouldn't go any farther than the buttonhole. And I would do that on both sides. Okay. So clean your little stitches up here, cut them out. Same thing on this side here, clean them out. Now, what you're going to do is make sure that you're on the right, make sure you got the fuse, whether it's non-fusible or fused, the one that's attached to the fabric, and go ahead and fold it on that line that you just did. I usually iron it out. Now, what I normally do is I grab a glue stick. That glue stick is a lifesaver. And I would go ahead and put some on there on both sides. I even put some underneath so it sticks on the inseam. Open it up, put it on there. And I would go ahead and run some on here. Okay. And just fold it on that blue line. Put a hot iron on it. So that's attached already. And you've got your line, you've got your 3-inch width cuff. You can see I have the extended on there. And at this point here, what I would do is I would go ahead and put either 1/4 or 3/8, whatever you want to use, seam allowance, and I would draw a line. And I would cut that out. Okay, just like that. Now, let me bring the sleeve in. Normally, this was a French cuff. And when you have a French cuff, the button placket is always folded to the inside, like this. In a regular barrel cuff, it's opened. That's the only difference between the setup on the placket for a French cuff versus a barrel cuff. So if you had French cuffs originally, they're going to be tacked on, or you're going to have to untack them. And the reason being is you're going to have to run and test it, just like you've been doing all along. You're going to test it, and you're going to create and see how much pleat you need in there. So you're going to run it. You're going to run your pleat on there. And in this particular case, we'll see how much we have. You figure out whether you want 1 pleat, 2 pleats, or 3. So in this case here, it looks like we have about 2 inches. Yeah, about 2.5. So each one would be 1 1/4 inches. So you'd come over here and mark off your pleats wherever you want to start at 1 1/4 inches. You'd make 2 of them separated by 1/2 inch. Now, you'll run your first stitch, like I said, just like a regular sewing of any cuff, a barrel cuff. You'll do it all the way down, and you'll turn it to the right side. And when you turn it to the right side, obviously this will be tucked under. And let me put it here, simulate. And this will already be turned and tacked, like yay. This will be stitched, like, hope you can see that, all right? So what you'll do is you'll start at the buttonhole, very small stitch, back tack. Make sure you got it all lined up. And then you'll turn, and because you've already got a stitching, you turn it to the wrong insides. It's pretty smooth sailing. You just have to make sure you've already put in your pleat properly. And when you come down to the other end, it'll be the same thing. Now remember, in a barrel cuff, it's all open. So again, you'll have it like you'll come down, a small stitch, and back tack, and that's it. That's how simple it really is. Sometimes they'll ask you if you can put 2 buttonholes. Now it just depends on how wide you have them. In this particular case, I probably could make an additional buttonhole if you wanted 2 buttonholes. Sometimes this buttonhole will be down here, and you will have to put another buttonhole, make a buttonhole in there, because it just will be off balance. But in most cases, you'll find that if it's a single buttonhole, you won't have much of a problem at all. So you'll just have to be careful of where the actual placement of the original buttonholes are. And of course, since it was formerly a French cuff, of course, one will be the button side and one will be the buttonhole, and you'll just sew them on there like normal. I normally don't open the other side of the buttonhole, the one that has the button on it. I just leave it closed. Obviously, the buttonhole side is already open from previous, and that's about it. And you get a lot of those too. Men buy French cuffs, or they're given as a present, and they ultimately find out that it's kind of an inconvenience every morning to be, putting your French cuffs. Sometimes men feel like it's overdressed, and so this is what they do. They convert them. And not only that, but sometimes the French cuffs, right where the fold is at, and this would be the fold, they're all stained and stuff. And a lot of times by doing this, you can remove the stain and have a perfectly good barrel cuff. So that's something to look for too. And that's about it. Let's continue.